it's Lorian. Sorry for no makeup. I really don't have time. I have to film 3 videos, so I'm going to be wearing the same outfit for everything. It is Top 10 Wednesday, and today I am talking about top 10 facts about the Lord of the Rings that not very many people who haven't read the books or the Silmarillion know. So let's get started. These aren't actually in order. They're just things that people don't talk about. They're just 10 facts about the Lord of the Rings. So let's talk about Entwives. Now there is no official record of what happened to the Entwives. They're mentioned in the extended edition of the Two Towers, and they are also mentioned in the Two Towers in the Lord of the Rings and a little bit in the Return of the King. The Entwives are the female version of the Ents, which are the living trees that Treebeard is. There is a huge belief that ripples through the community, the Lord of the Rings fandom, is that the Entwives are in the Old Forest. They don't go into the Old Forest very much at all in the movies, but in the Fellowship of the Ring, they get trapped in the Old Forest. A tree tries to kill them, and they're saved by the character Tom Bombadil, who was removed entirely from the films, which I don't mind. I don't like Tom Bombadil, but he has to rescue them because the trees try to kill them, and they are warned from going into the Old Forest right next to the Shire because the Old Forest does. It can kill people. You remember the angry trees that eat the orcs in the extended editions of the Two Towers? Yeah, that's the Old Forest 24/7. Fangorn and the Old Forest are very, very similar. That's why people believe that the Entwives are in the Old Forest. This has never been confirmed by Christopher Tolkien or J.R.R. Tolkien, probably because Tolkien never said what happened to them, where they went, or anything. But it's just so interesting, the parallels between Fangorn Forest and the Old Forest when there are no Ents in the Old Forest. Another thing to talk about is the character of Eowyn in the Two Towers and the Return of the King. These were written back in the 1940s when women really weren't allowed to be badass. They kind of were in World War II, but Tolkien was even older than World War II. He was an old man when that happened. He fought in World War I, and women weren't really allowed to be on the front lines and take any positions. However, there is from a Shakespeare play, I think it's Macbeth, where they talk about how no man born of woman can defeat him. Sorry if you hear my brother. He's playing video games. Tolkien wanted that to be a woman. He thought that'd be a great plot twist and really cool. This is one of the first times ever in literature since Joan of Arc that we get to, which isn't literature, that really happened. But anyway, it's one of the first stories that actually includes a female fighter. And I love that Tolkien, born in the 1800s, wanted to have a female warrior take place in this series, because women aren't really in the Lord of the Rings, but the only one that we really see on, or in book, in text, a lot, other than Galadriel, is Eowyn, and she is a female fighter. And I love that he doesn't diminish her for being a female warrior. He doesn't make her less of a woman for being that way. He does say that if you're going to be a warrior, you shouldn't do it because you want to kill yourself because you aren't with the guy that you love. He did say that, but he also had Aragorn tell Éomer she is no less of a warrior than you are, which I really, really enjoyed reading. And it was just awesome to see women fighting in literature back in the day in a classic. Another thing that a lot of people don't know if they've only watched the movies and haven't read the books is that the timeline of the books is very interesting. The Fellowship of the Ring, it's pretty darn straightforward. Then we get to the Two Towers, and in the Two Towers we have a split. Each book has 2 books in it. You have book 1 and 2, which are pretty straightforward, but book 3 follows the rest of the Fellowship, while book 4 only follows Frodo and Sam. It's one of the reasons that a scene that's only in the extended edition of the movies is in there and not in the original, and it works so well. And it's at the gate, with the mouth of Sauron comes out of the gate and talks to them and tell them that Frodo's dead. In the movie it doesn't work very well because we know Frodo isn't dead. He was captured very briefly. Sam saved him before he got really any hurt or anything. He was just scared and was threatened, but he wasn't killed, he wasn't tortured or anything like that. It worked in the Return of the King because we actually hadn't reached Sam and Frodo's part. The last thing we saw was that he'd been taken into the tower and Sam couldn't get in. That happened at the very end of the Two Towers. That's all in the Return of the King in the movie because they fixed the timeline. The Frodo-Sam timeline was further ahead than the rest of the Fellowship. So in the Two Towers, Frodo and Sam are watching the army marching to attack Minas Tirith. And that doesn't happen until the Return of the King in text. So it was pretty interesting to see that. It's totally not modern. That's not the way that books are done now. And I haven't really seen any other books that do that kind of thing with a split timeline. Another thing that they don't go very much into in the movies because they don't have time is relationships with royals. This is going on my next point, which is nuanced relationships, but first I want to focus on that. One of the things that we see is Aragorn's character growth. He's this vagabond almost. He just kind of wanders around. He doesn't really have a place in life and in the world. He just tries to help people, but he's supposed to be a king. He doesn't want to be a king. They do put that in the movies. That's true in the books too, but it becomes clear that the only way to defeat Sauron and to continue to protect the lands that he's been fighting for 80 years to protect, he has to take up this mantle. And when that happens, they don't go into it so much, but when that happens, his relationship with the hobbits change. His relationship with Gandalf is pretty much the same because Gandalf has known he was the heir for a long time. His relationship with Arwen remains unchanged. His relationship with Elrond doesn't even change all that much. Elrond raised Aragorn, by the way, in case you didn't know that. But his relationship with the hobbits, especially Pippin, does alter. And it's a nuance, it's a subtle type of change in their relationship. Before, they even talk about it in The Return of the King. Before, when Pippin was with Strider, he could get in his face, he could question him, and they were buddies more than anything else. But when Aragorn comes as Elisar, King of Gondor, that is a different person, and he can't treat him the same. In private, he actually can still treat him as Strider, but not in public. He is a esquire of Gondor. He serves Aragorn, and he treats him like he is his lord and king, and Pippin does talk about it a little bit, how it's different. Moving on with that type of relationship with royals, that's a nuanced relationship that we don't see very often, where the push and pull in relationships, depending on situation, changes. And it's a very special type of bond. Quite often now, when it's a nuanced relationship, it's romantic. And it's only romantic, it seems. Or it's pretty much like, no, I'm going to do my own thing, because that's the way that Americans live their lives now. But in nuanced relationship, it's like that relationship with Aragorn and Pippin, where different situation calls for different reactions. And a big one is Frodo and Sam. Sam is Frodo's servant. He's not his friend, actually. He's his servant, and that's why he loves Frodo, and he's willing to die for Frodo, because while Frodo is his friend, technically, they're not buddy-buddy. They're not gonna be like, oh, it's all cool and everything. And in the movies, they did a great job showing it, and it's one of the reasons people think that they're romantically inclined. Actually, no, both of them are pretty straight, although Frodo never gets with anyone because he's too damaged, and he can barely function in life after he gets back in The Return of the King to the Shire. He can't do anything. But Sam, you know, he has a girl that he loves. He doesn't love Frodo the same way. We don't see that in literature so much anymore. We don't see that in books. It's very hard to see two friends who are so tight and close and so strong without being romantically inclined. I have that relationship with L.A. Knight. To this day, people still believe that me and her are romantically together, and that's not true. She has a husband. I don't swing that way. I'm not interested in Raven at all that way, but we love each other and we will die for each other, and the way Frodo and Sam treat each other is very similar to our relationship. And because we're not related, it's really weird to many, many people's eyes. But actually, I love that it's in this, and it's in this a lot. It's in with Legolas and Gimli, and they become super, super close, and it's really cool. And I love that we see that all throughout the books with all sorts of characters. And we see in The Two Towers with Eowyn and Aragorn how it can become almost romantic, and yet how it doesn't have to be with other characters. And I love that. Another fact is that the Maiar, which is what Gandalf is, they are the wizards. We are going all the way back to the Silmarillion. Gandalf is actually what Sauron is. So let's back this up. So in the Silmarillion, you learn the creation of the world. There was one god. There was Eru the One. Eru is basically God, and he created the Valar, who are godlike beings, but who are mostly his children. They created everything. The sun, the moon, the stars, the planet, the elves, the dwarves, not the men, but they created almost everything. Morgoth, who is mentioned in the Fellowship of the Ring, he's the creator of the Balrogs. Morgoth is basically the devil, and he created Sauron. Sauron is his #1 servant. In the Silmarillion, Morgoth was trying to destroy the earth, wipe out the elves, men, dwarves, the whole shebang. He wanted to control everything. The Valar eventually stepped in and took him down. However, his #1 servant, Sauron, was not taken out. So they created the Maya. I think that's how you call them. Or the Istari, the wizards, Sauron, Radagast, Gandalf, and 2 others who are never given any face time in any of the books, nor are they named. It's the reason why Gandalf in the movie goes the 2 blues. I can't remember who they are. I laughed at that because they don't have names. They don't exist. They are there. There's 2 blues that we never see. They were created to counteract Sauron, and their task, which is why Gandalf came back from the dead in the 2 towers, are to defeat Sauron. That's what the Maya are, the Istari. They are actually angels, and they arrived in the form of old men. And they're about 1,000 years old by the time that we get into the Fellowship of the Ring, maybe just under that in The Hobbit. That's why they seem to have their own agenda, and they keep doing things because their #1 goal is to defeat Sauron. When that happens, they can go back to the Valar and live out their lives as regular Ma'aya and not Istari wizard men dudes. And that's also why they're incredibly powerful. Now, going on to The Hobbit here. A lot of people are really frustrated. I keep seeing this meme. I feel stretched, like 1 book made into 3 movies. Now, there are filler into The Hobbit in films. The biggest one is Tario doesn't exist, which I'm glad she's in because we need more girls in this universe. There's not very many. We got Arwen, Galadriel, Eowyn, and that's it. Her creation in The Hobbit was great in my opinion. However, the whole arc with Gandalf, people are annoyed that that's in there. It's in this book. There is a point, I don't have it exactly marked. Basically, after Smaug was defeated and the armies were gathering and we were moving up to the Battle of 5 Armies, that's an actual chapter in here. When that happens, Gandalf and Bilbo meet up, and Bilbo's like, where have you been? What have you been doing? And he goes on this mini explanation. It may not have been in the original because this book was very different. Once he decided to write the Lord of the Rings trilogy, he had to alter this. He added in how Bilbo found the ring and what actually happened. He didn't just find it. There was the whole Gollum part, and he may have added in this paragraph. But there is a huge paragraph. It's most of a page in this edition, and I've never forgotten it because I reread it like 3 times. Gandalf gives him the lowdown. Look. You know there's this necromancer to the south. Yeah, the necromancer isn't a necromancer. It's Sauron the Dark Lord. I don't think you know very much about him, but basically, he actually never died. He's gathering an army. We're on the verge of going into a huge world war, so we destroyed the castle and broke it down, and this is a really big deal, and things are going to get very serious in about 100 years, and I know you don't really care about that, so I'm just going to say, I was busy. That's pretty much what happens and what he says and how he handles it, which proves that the whole Gandalf arc is legit. Although they didn't run into Radagast, but it is very much legit. The Istari gathered with Lady Galadriel and Lord Elrond, and they destroyed the Necromancer's Keep, and it was a huge plot line, and it's only a single paragraph in this book. If you go and read The Return of the King and the appendices, they give a breakdown. Gandalf went at this point. At this point, he met Thrain. At this point, he did this. At this point, he did that. At this point, they gathered together. At this point, they destroyed it. That plot line that they added in the movies, I'm so glad they did because it is legit, it is canon, it's in this book, and Tolkien just didn't write it in. He did that whole thing with the Arwen and Aragorn love. That is real canon. That isn't made up. Peter Jackson didn't pull a rabbit out of his hat. That's in the book. My second to last fact is, did you know that there's cannibalism in this? Beyond the orcs eating each other, which is disgusting, but it happens. In The Return of the King, there's an entire plot point that is not in the movies at all, and that is the Scouring of the Shire. It's not in there at all because it really would have screwed up the pacing of the movie, and I understood it, but it also wrapped up what happened to Saruman and Grima Wormtongue. In the movie, they have them in the extended version of The Return of the King. Legolas shoots Wormtongue after Wormtongue stabs Saruman. In the book, that's sort of not really happened. What happened is that Saruman had actually been taking over the Shire. That's why there's pipeweed that Merry and Pippin find. In this, it's like Nazi Germany's moved in. That whole vision that Frodo has in the Fellowship of the Ring, that they actually put in was what happened in the Scouring of the Shire. The hobbits basically being forced to do things. It just wasn't orcs that did it. It was men hired by Saruman. So when Saruman is kicked out of Orthanc, he goes immediately to the Shire and makes things worse. And it turns out, you remember the Sackville Bagginses. I don't remember what his name was, but the son of the Sackville Bagginses, the old man that laughed when the fireworks went off and his wife glared at him and he stopped laughing. He was like, ugh. He died. His son was basically running the Shire for Saruman, but didn't like what he was doing. And so Saruman had him killed and forced Grima to eat him. Now, granted, Grima's a man and that guy's a hobbit, but ew. Ew. Nasty, nasty, nasty. Raven is the one who pointed out there's cannibalism in The Hobbit, and I hadn't finished rereading The Return of the King yet, and I finished rereading it, and yeah, there is. On to the final plot point. We are going to talk about Arwen. There is a lot of misconception about what happened to Arwen because, again, it's not in the books. Arwen is only there for 2 scenes. When she gets married to Aragorn and when they are at the Council of Elrond. She has no other scenes in the book. It's another elf that comes and rescues Frodo. All the background stuff, that's in the appendices, but she is not in book. So, even if you've read the books, you may not understand everything that happened. And a lot of people have difficulty understanding why didn't she go to the Undying Lands, especially after Aragorn died. Because the way the movie made it seem is that she wandered for eternity alone in grief. That's not what happens. Okay, we're gonna go back to the Silmarillion, y'all. We're gonna talk about Beren and Luthien. Beren and Luthien is Arwen and Aragorn's ancestor. And Beren was a man, Luthien was an elven princess, and they fell in love. And Luthien made a choice to live a life with Beren. And when he died, she died as a mortal after. Later on, their children were half elven, and then there was another elvish and human pairing with Elrond's parents. Elrond's full name is said in The Hobbit, and it's said just once in the Fellowship of the Ring. His name is Elrond Half-Elven, Lord of Rivendell. And you may be going, half-elven? Yes. Elrond's, I think it's his mother, I'm not positive. One of his parents is elven and one of his parents is human. So he was a half-elven, half-human, already with the elven side mixed with Beren's blood, part human. The Valar came down, because remember how I said the Valar created everything except humans. Humans weren't created by the Valar, they were created by Eru the One. As such, the afterlife for elves is different for the afterlife for humans. They actually have no clue what happens to human spirits or souls or whatever after they die. They don't know. Luthien chose to go to the human afterlife. From what I understand, she made that choice and they granted it to her. She asked the Valar to let her go with Beren, and they gave it to her. However, because they have this mix of the human elven blood, they're not quite sure what to do. And so when Elrond was young, they set it down for him and his brother Elros. You have to choose elf or man. You can't be both. You have to be one or the other. Elrond chose to be elven. His brother chose to be human. Aragorn is his many times descendant. We're talking thousands and thousands of years, y'all. Elrond is old. That's why when Elrond's father was killed and his mother was on the run, Elrond raised Aragorn. Let's fast forward to Arwen and Aragorn. They fell in love. They actually had never met because she was in Lothlorien when he was being raised in Rivendell. And they met when they were both adults. He knew he wasn't Elrond's son like he thought he was. He is human with a little bit of elven blood, which is why he's 80 and is gonna live to be about 200 years old. That's a long time, y'all. When Arwen made the choice, I choose a mortal life, she's not just choosing to be mortal. She is also choosing the afterlife. I just read something that the reason she could make that choice is because she's a descendant of Beren and Luthien. So, what actually happened? Eventually Aragorn got old and he died. When that happened, she tidied everything up with her children. She saw her son crowned, she put everything in the hands of her daughters, and then she went to Lothlorien, which was empty because the elves had left. What happened is she went to Lothlorien, she didn't wander for eternity. It's not that stupid, y'all. She lived less than a year after Aragorn died. I'm guessing about 6 months. 6 months later, she died. She was reunited with Aragorn in the afterlife as she chose. It was very sad that she chose not to be with Elrond and everyone. And I am sad that her story isn't in the books at all. When I read the Silmarillion, I like triple checked to make sure I got it right. She chose the mortal afterlife. She chose an eternity with Aragorn. So that's what really happened. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this. Those were my 10 Lord of the Rings not known facts. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to see more, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Oh, my kitty's in the shot. I don't know if you can see him. Here's my kitty. Here's my kitty. Say hello to the world. Hello, Internet. I'm scared of everything. His name is Strider, by the way. After Strider from Lord of the Rings. Extended edition. Excuse me. Well, burn on my face. But then we get to the Return of the Return of the King. I'm talking a lot. The Valar to but my cat's meowing. He wants out, but I want to film. Anyway, basically, after what's his name? Schmog. Sorry if you can hear my mom. My mom just came home. But I understand why they didn't put it in. One, it would have really screwed up with the pacing of the movie. Why do I have hair on my nose? That's my eyebrow. I'm not positive who it is, but one of his who is going,